Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling match review show. West Ham United 3, Newcastle United 1. We have finally won a Premier League game of football at home for the first time since February of this year. First win under Nuno Espirito Santo as well. And as you can tell, I'm smiling. I'm happy for once on one of these review shows, and we get to break down and review exactly where Nuno set up correctly for this West Ham team against a Newcastle team that looked a little bit tired, looked a little bit fatigued across the line, and West Ham capitalised on that. And I thought it was an excellent performance from West Ham. And this has to be the blueprint now moving forwards, going into the next games, especially with Burnley at home coming next Saturday. But we're going to review how exactly Nuno got the better of Eddie Howe in this 3-1 win for West Ham over Newcastle. So if you do enjoy the breakdown, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, as that massively helps us out. And yeah, I am so happy. It was a fantastic performance. I thought the atmosphere was very good in the second half at London Stadium as well, which we haven't seen in such a long time. And the players responded to that. The players gave us something to respond to initially as well. And I'm just very, very proud of the performance because we showed the energy levels that are required to compete in the Premier League, which we haven't done in recent weeks. And to be honest, for the majority of this season so far, still a lot of work to go. We're still in the bottom three, but it's a massive step forward in terms of just getting that confidence back, getting that flow back, because I said it before in the preview, we've got the quality to get out of this position. It's just whether the intensity and application is going to come from these players. And we showed that against a really tough and resilient Newcastle side that we've been accustomed to over the years. But yeah, I think it was a tale of two stories, really. West Ham were just fantastic and Newcastle were very off it, to be honest. I don't think they particularly played well. But again, credit to West Ham there because we made it very difficult for Newcastle to play through, which we'll get to shortly. But it all started with the lineup. We've spoken about the lineup being incorrect under Nuno over the last couple of weeks, but he made a much better decision this time around. I would say this is pretty much what we wanted or expected to see from our best 11 with the players we had available. And some of the big calls he made was bringing in Potts into the midfield, bringing Fernandes back into the midfield, taking out both Irving and Souček, and Paqueta playing alongside that midfield three, and then starting Wilson as the striker as well, with Bowen and Somerville either side. It was a big call from Nuno to do that, but to his credit, he learned from the mistakes that he made not once but twice against Leeds and Brentford, and we saw ourselves come out on top in that midfield predominantly throughout the majority of the game, and Freddie Potts was pivotal in that, and I can't be happier for him because he was so good to come in and start like that in the first time in the Premier League and perform at that level against a team like Newcastle, who offers the physicality and the technical ability, which we mentioned in the preview. It's fantastic. It's an excellent start for Freddie Potts, and I'm hoping that's going to solidify his position in the West Ham team. But before we get into the breakdown of the goals, let's take a look at the stats and the tail of the tape from the game. So as expected, Newcastle dominated a lot of possession. That predominantly came from the second half when we were defending our lead. But look at the other stats. We haven't seen this so far this season. Higher XG at 1.75 to their 0.52. More shots on target, more big chances. And, less passes, more corners, fouls committed, Newcastle slightly higher. So we saw a better performance from West Ham. And I think that's what's pleased me most about this win, is that it was a deserved win. It really was. And I thought we performed excellently throughout the 90-minute period, other than the blip at the start, which was frustrating, which we'll get into. But again, the reaction and the response from the players was very good. For a team that's lacking confidence and in the position we are in the league, I thought it was a fantastic response. And it was frustrating because we started really well. The energy was high. We obviously came very close to scoring, and then literally 30 seconds later, Newcastle find themselves 1-0 up. So let's go through that goal, because it was actually really nicely worked from West Ham to start with. Paqueta picks up the ball deep, plays a nice disguised pass down the line into Somerville. Somerville does a first-time flick inside, and Juve's come into this occupying central space. And again, it's one-touch football. Juve then plays through Somerville, who was fantastic throughout the whole game yesterday. He was offering an outlet going forwards, and defensively he was fantastic as well. And we find ourselves in this position where Somerville's carried us up the pitch. Bowen's come into central positions, which we saw again throughout the entire game against Newcastle, just drifting in between the centre-backs and full-backs at times. Picks up the ball in this position, and he actually disguises the shot first time. You can't really see it from this screenshot, but he fakes to shoot just to create that extra yard of space, and then he lets fire. And unfortunately for him, it hits the post. And We come really, really close in that moment to 3 or 4 minutes into the game, taking the lead. And that would have set the precedent for that entire game going forwards. But this is where we need to make sure Nuno gets the coaching right of these players. And I think we've got a tendency to do it, West Ham, is we score a goal or we do something like that, and the energy's up, the crowd's up. Instantly, the players are like, right, press, go, go, energy high. And it doesn't really work like that. You need to be more systemized in how you're doing it. And that's exactly how Newcastle's goal comes, because of the energy that we've got, because we've got our tails up. We've just hit the post inside 3 or 4 minutes. We're almost like wanting to immediately rush things and keep things going. And it's something that we need to coach out of this team, because it's going to continue to cost us in the future if we continue to do that. But you can see from here, Newcastle recover the ball. So this is in the same sequence. Bruno picks up the ball here. And Voltemade, he just drops in between the midfield and the centre-backs to find his space. And it's a good pass from Bruno into Voltemade. But then Kilman, as I mentioned, very aggressive into Voltemade. Wins his first duel. Great, fantastic. The ball then ricochets out over towards Gordon. What Kilman needs to do here is just get back into his position, reset, allow the midfield to regroup, and we'll be fine. We won't be able to play on the counter like we did. But Kilman makes the wrong decision. And this is what I'm saying about the energy levels and the intensity and making the right decision in that moment. He cannot go and chase the ball here because he's left a massive gap. We're not set for it. And Gordon, all he does is just walks back with the ball. It's one touch inside Kilman, as we can see here, and he's around him. And we've got a massive gap in our defense, having just almost scored to now being in a position where we're very vulnerable to a counter-attack, which we know we have been susceptible to in the past. And then we find ourselves in this position. So Kilman's out of position. Potts has had to drop into the back line. So that then creates a massive gap in the midfield where Fernandes has already pushed up. Paqueta's tried to block off Joe Linton, but Newcastle have that extra man advantage because Kilman's pushed out of position. Bruno picks up the ball, plays the ball out wide to Murphy. And you can see here in this freeze frame, Kilman is not back into his position. So immediately Newcastle have that extra man advantage when they're counter-attacking. But even at this point, it was still preventable as a goal. And again, it just comes down to individual mistakes or individual battles and not winning them. And Juve, who I thought recovered really, really well yesterday, had a very, very sloppy start. And this was way too easy for Murphy. You can see here, Murphy cuts inside. Juve's body positioning is all over the place. Murphy then just cuts back outside. And again, Juve isn't positioned well enough or close enough to stop Murphy from doing this. Murphy gets a shot off, and I think this freeze frame shows it quite well, just how far away Juve is from Murphy when the shot is taken. And again, just shouldn't be going in from this position. It's a good strike from Murphy. Obviously puts Newcastle 1-0 up, but it was too easy. It was silly from Kilman in the initial intervention when he wins the ball really well, but then decides to continue pressing, and it was just a mistake. There's no other ways around it. And then the recovery isn't there in time to get back. And then Juve, who is 1v1 versus Murphy, is too easy. It's way too easy to get past him. So a couple of mistakes in there that frustratingly led us to go 1-0 down when we were a team that were playing really, really well in those first few minutes, and the energy was quite high. So to get that setback so early on was frustrating. However, saying that, the reaction was quite good. I think we settled back into the game quite well. We didn't let that goal kind of phase us really. We obviously had the penalty shout that wasn't a penalty. It took way too long for VAR to decide that it wasn't a penalty, but they got to the right decision. And we were just looking at ways to create and find opportunities to bypass that relatively passive Newcastle midfield. And it's something we spoke about before in the previews against Newcastle. They like to play that 4-5-1 out of possession where their five in midfield are very flat. So they'll play a midfield three of, in this case, it was Joe Linton, Tonali and Bruno. They play very, very flat. But what that allowed us to do was allowed Potts to get on the ball a lot easier. It allowed Paqueta and Fernandes to drop in and get on the ball. And they weren't really getting under pressure. So it allowed us to play in those pockets and get the ball out wide, predominantly to Somerville, sometimes to Bowen, but he was more drifting in, or Wan-Bissaka on the overlap, or Juve on the overlap. So I think Newcastle approached it wrong, to be honest. They should have at that moment realised that we were vulnerable and continue to press on and force us into mistakes. However, we didn't let that phase us. We took control back of the game. I think in the first half, possession was pretty much 50-50. So it was quite a balanced game. And I thought we were pressing really well. We were creating a couple of half opportunities. And it was just good that we didn't collapse at that moment, because we've seen it time and time again. West Ham conceding an early goal to a situation that could have been avoided, and heads drop and we don't get back into the rhythm or the flow of the game, and the energy gets zapped out of the crowd and the players. we didn't allow that to happen. We continued going, and we reaped our rewards from that. And it was, again, from our pressing. We wasn't just being passive in moments. We forced Newcastle into the mistake. Callum Wilson's the first one to press here onto Botman, and then you can see Paqueta's pushing up onto Bruno. Somerville's ready to go onto Thiaw, the other Newcastle centre-back. And we find ourselves in this position where we're forcing Newcastle to go long. And then it's about, can we win our duels? Can we win that second ball in this second phase of play? And that's where I mentioned about the difference with Freddie Potts in that midfield yesterday. It wasn't the prettiest. It wasn't the prettiest performance from Potts. I thought he kept things very neat and tidy, but he was there in the right moments. And that's something we've lacked in that midfield. It's the legs, it's the intensity, it's the reading of the game. And he gets in front of his man. He reads the ball really, really well, wins the header, and West Ham then recycle possession from that. We then move it forwards. This is about 20 seconds later. We've gone down the line, crossed it in, Pope's punched it out, and Fernandes picks up the ball on the second loose opportunity, heads it into the path of Paqueta. And at this point, it doesn't really look like there's much on other than maybe recycling out to Juve or switching it out to Wan-Bissaka if he makes that move. Newcastle are kind of set. They're regrouping from the punch out from Pope. But he takes a touch and I think catches everyone by surprise, to be honest, at how quickly he takes it, because there isn't actually much backlift in the shot from Paqueta. It's kind of generated all from standing still. So he decides to shoot early. And again, the goalkeeper should be saving it because it's at his near post and it almost goes through Pope's hands. But we find ourselves back in the game. And again, Paqueta was fantastic yesterday, which we haven't seen that consistency of. And it's going to be I feel like it's going to be a recurring theme of Lucas Paqueta. He will have those games where he's fantastic and everything he's doing is right. And that shot there, again, probably shouldn't go in, but he has the instinct and he has the ability to create something from nothing, which sometimes West Ham needed. And we just needed that little bit of luck there because things weren't really going for us. We obviously get the sucker punch from hitting the post and conceding. We then have the penalty that gets overturned, but we didn't let it phase us. We continued playing. Newcastle remained pretty passive. They had a couple of moments, but nothing really that we couldn't deal with. And we got our rewards. And I think on the balance of that first 35, 40 minutes, we deserve to equalise. And that's something I haven't found myself saying much when supporting West Ham this season, or to be honest, in recent seasons, as we haven't really deserved to win when we have won. So it was good to see us get an equaliser at that point in the game, which was very crucial. And at that point, you're thinking, right, we've got it in. Let's get into half-time, 1-1 and reset. But actually, it's Newcastle that switch off before half-time. I think 5 minutes were added, and we find ourselves in this position. And this is what I talk about with the flat five that Newcastle play. So you've got Voltemade, the lone striker. You can see midfield five of Newcastle, all in a line, pretty high up, quite a lot of space between the defence and midfield. But it's quite a passive approach. So all Potts has to do is play it across to Fernandes. And again, this is what I was saying about the midfield five of Newcastle just being happy to sit in, but not really applying much pressure to Potts or Paqueta or Fernandes. And it just allowed us a little bit of time and space to create some opportunities. And this is where Fernandes does really, really well, because he can see Voltemade's coming. He fakes the pass in this instance, so it looks like he's going to go long. And then he just takes an extra touch here and gets in front of Voltemade. And at this point, this is again fantastic from Fernandes and very intelligent football, because what Bowen's done, I mentioned it before, he kind of plays a little bit more centrally to occupy that space. Dan Burn makes the mistake of following him in. So here you can see Fernandes is almost shaping to pass to Bowen in this instance. So that's what Dan Burn tries to recognise. But Gordon's let Wan-Bissaka run off him. And all Fernandes does, he just takes an extra touch before passing, and then he's got that space in behind Dan Burn. And then he finds this pass here. So you can see there, Dan Burn's gone into Jared Bowen, sorry. Gordon's kind of standing still and ball watching there. And Wan-Bissaka's made that run where he's got the space in behind. So again, just if we take it back one frame, this faked pass here to here, it just creates that extra little half a yard of space that you need in the Premier League for Fernandes to play that pass over the top. And it was a fantastic pass over the top, right into the path of Wan-Bissaka. Wan-Bissaka doesn't even need to take a touch. He just plays a first-time cross in. And there we talk about that little moment of luck, that little bit of fortune that West Ham haven't been getting recently. And you can see here, the own goal from Botman is very unfortunate. He sticks a leg out to try and block the cross. Again, it doesn't even look like it's probably making Callum Wilson at this point, so he could have left it, but that's in hindsight. And the ball trickles into the net just before half-time. And West Ham find themselves 2-1 up against Newcastle with 45 minutes to play. And again, it was deserved. Obviously, both of the goals are a little bit scrappy. Pope should save the first one. The second one's a little bit of fortune, but we were creating some good chances. Wilson had a chance. Bowen obviously hit the post. Somerville cutting in on his right and failed his shot. But again, we were creating those moments for ourselves, which led me to be a bit more positive about the second half. And I thought we had a really good platform to work from, because that's what we now see the benefits of Nuno from, because we know how well he defensively coaches his teams, especially once taking leads, to defend what he's got, and then platform players like Somerville, Bowen, Fernandez to then counter attack with speed and look to get into those spaces and exploit those gaps that Newcastle were inevitably going to leave in the second half. And to be honest, I was surprised at Eddie Howe's approach in the second half. It just filled me with massive confidence when he took off both Gordon and Voltemade at half time. I was really, really surprised that he did that. And it just didn't work. Joe Linton, who I thought was really, really poor for Newcastle, somehow stayed on for the majority of the game, if not the entirety of the game. I think he forced him out onto the left to start the second half, then moved him back into midfield. It's strange because they had Alanga, they had Willock, they had Ramsey, they had the Osula that came on. They had so many players that could have come on. And I thought Joe Linton was probably the weaker link in that midfield, and they could have afforded to take him off in that moment, because we were very happy to sit in. I think in the 60th minute, we obviously take off Callum Wilson, play Souček to just sit in front. Igor comes on towards the end and we make a back five and we're really compact. Kyle Walker-Peters comes into the picture. So it was very clear what we were doing. I feel like Newcastle could have definitely benefited from that extra creative player in those moments, because Joe Linton wasn't really doing much defensively either in transitions. So I think that was a mistake from Eddie Howe. And I feel like that just gave West Ham a little bit more confidence. Obviously, taking off Gordon and Voltemade, arguably two of Newcastle's better attacking players. And it just gave me a little bit more confidence going into that second half. And I thought we defended so well. We obviously got really close on a lot of occasions. We had a couple of set pieces, a couple of crossed opportunities. The disallowed goal, which was, I think, Souček's toe was offside in the build-up, which cancelled out what would have been Freddie Potts' first goal in the Premier League for West Ham, which would have been unbelievable for him. But we didn't get it. We continued pressing. We continued defending when we needed to. And I think that's where Newcastle struggled. They just didn't know how to break us down. And we were very, very comfortable. I don't really remember Newcastle having a massive opportunity. I think there was a header in the 90th minute that Areola comfortably saved. But other than that, there really wasn't much at all. I thought we defended outstandingly. The effort, the application, the teamwork of West Ham was fantastic. It's something we haven't seen. It was just a coherent structure for once. And it was interesting that both Kilman and Todibo were playing on opposite sides of centre-backs. So you had Kilman playing on the right side, Todibo on the left side. Strange decision, it seemed, to be honest, because obviously you're playing them on their weaker sides. But there's a reason behind that. It just allows them to be a little bit more comfortable when balls are coming into the box, when they're defending out wide in isolation. It just allows them to show players onto their weaker foots and keeps them in a more comfortable position, is probably why Nuno's done it. And also, to be honest, it's the most comfortable Todibo's looked in a West Ham shirt in a long time. So credit to Nuno for doing that. But the entire West Ham team was fantastic. And the biggest difference was the midfield, the energy, the intensity, the technical ability we then had. I thought in the second half we were a little bit too passive at times. But again, you have to take context into perspective. We haven't won a game of football under Nuno yet. We're in a position where we're almost 6 points adrift of the relegation zone going into this game. We're just determined to get that 3 points by any means possible. So I understood the rash decisions that were being made, but I think as the game progressed in the second half, we started to get the flow back and we started to play a little bit more football, and that's where the chances came. And as the game went on, obviously Newcastle were pushing and pushing and pushing. We just weren't budging. And then we find ourselves right at the end with a very nice opportunity on the counter-attack, which we take to make 3-1. And again, it comes from us commanding, leading, Kilman coming out and meeting a header and winning his header. Fantastic. Something we haven't seen from those centre-backs, showing a little bit of leadership back there and taking the game by the scruff of the neck when you need to. In the 96th minute here, you can see coming up and leaping and winning the ball. Great. We win the first duel. And then Bowen picks up the ball. And this is exactly what Nuno is going to instill and create in this West Ham team. It's not just resting on laurels. You look at the players here, Souček and Kyle Walker-Peters, they're a little bit more fresh because they've just come on. But even Paqueta on the top of your screen, willing to bust a gut to get forwards in the 96th minute after having gone down 2 or 3 times with cramp, clearly out on his feet. But he's not resting on that. He knows how Nuno wants to play. He recognises that there's an opportunity for us to kill this game off. And that's exactly what we go and do. And Bowen just waits his time, plays it to Paqueta. Paqueta then returns the favour if we just move it forwards here. An excellently timed through ball, just onside. Bowen times his run well between Tonali and Joe Linton. Again, very close to scoring himself. Bowen, it kind of trickles under Pope's legs and he gets a little bit of touch on it. But then when you're asking someone to, commit themselves and give everything to West Ham, who other than Thomas Souček to be there to bundle this across in front of Pope and put West Ham 3-1 up and confirm the victory for West Ham. And we saw the Thomas Souček spin. We saw the celebrations from Nuno and his coaching team. And it just wraps off a fantastic victory, a fantastic 3 points, and a really, really important win for Nuno in his reign as West Ham manager against, as I mentioned, a really, really competitive, aggressive Newcastle team that has been since Eddie Howe arrived. So credit to West Ham in this game. We were fantastic. Freddie Potts, magnificent, excellent, deserved man of the match. I think Paqueta could have arguably got it as well, but circumstance, Potts coming into that midfield in the circumstances that it is, he was fantastic. He was really, really good. And I think that blend of Paqueta, Fernandes, Potts has to be the midfield going forwards. You're bringing on Souček in those moments to shore up games and win you points or confirm points, which he will do. You've then got the likes of Kyle Walker-Peters to come onto the pitch. You've got other players that can come on and shore up a game. So that has to be the midfield three for me. I think that has to be the starting lineup, to be honest. I wouldn't change anything from this going into the Burnley game. I think every player there deserves to start again. And we have to now build on this. We have to build up some momentum because this is just one stage. This Burnley game on Saturday coming up is massive because if we win that, we're on level on points with Burnley. We could, if we win it by 3 goals, hypothetically go above them in the league and get out of the relegation zone. But it just gives us a little bit of momentum going into that international break when we then play Bournemouth away and Liverpool at home before going into December. So a really, really important moment for this football club to build on this. We can't just take this one game and think we've done it. Yes, enjoy it, but we have to continue working now and get this result across the line against Burnley before the international break. And yeah, just on Newcastle, I thought they were a little bit too passive. They looked a little bit leggy. I just think the intensity of the West Ham team, which I was not expecting to be the case, outperformed Newcastle, which again, I think most people were surprised to see, to be honest, in that game. So massive respect for obviously what Eddie Howe's done at Newcastle. I think they've been fantastic, but they were just miles off it. I don't think his decision was correct at halftime to take off Gordon and Voltemade. I think he should have left those on, but West Ham deserved the win. And I think obviously Newcastle players and manager has come out and said West Ham fully deserved the win. So again, fair play for that because not every manager or player will do that. But I think everyone kind of recognised that West Ham deserved to win that game against Newcastle yesterday. And that's really, really important for us to then set that blueprint and benchmark going forwards into the next games that we play. But overall, really, really happy. I think defensively, we enjoyed the defensive side yesterday in the second half. I thought we took it in our stride, which we haven't seen often. We've been a little bit shaky in games, and I think we enjoyed and relished the opportunity of just sitting in and being tough to beat, which is not easy to do in the Premier League, especially, as I mentioned, against a Newcastle team. So fantastic display from everyone. Obviously, shout out, as I mentioned, to Potts. I thought Somerville was excellent. I thought Wilson done really, really well, trying to lead the line and holding the ball up. I thought he was very strong against two very strong and dominant centre-backs that Newcastle have. Bowen was fantastic again. And just the whole team just had so much more energy than we've used to seeing. And they had, again, a little bit more compactness and togetherness that we haven't seen. So credit to Nuno. He got it spot on. Fantastic team selection. And this, again, has to be the standard now. We have to get that result against Burnley. Otherwise, it's just one step forward and 2 steps back. But let me know down below in the comments, what did you think of West Ham's 3-1 win against Newcastle? Who was your man of the match? How would you now set up going into Burnley? And any other points from the game that you want to mention? Leave them down below. And yeah, we'll be back with the preview game of the Burnley later this week. Subscribe to the channel for more content if you enjoyed. Leave a like on the video, as that also massively helps us out. And I'm just so glad that we got the win. We can be happy this week. 3 points on the board. First 3 points for Nuno. And that is going to wrap things up for today's shoot. But as I mentioned, leave a like, subscribe, and until the next one, come on, you Irons.